It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Mike Harbour.
Hey, welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. My name is Mike Harbour. Today, joining me is my friend Paul Gustafson. Hey, Paul, how are you, my friend?
Mike, I'm doing well. Yeah, it's wintertime and just excited to be able to share some thoughts today and just really engage in this great discussion.
Yeah, we're continuing to launch into the new year with the Breaking Average podcast. I think we're getting close to episode 20 or somewhere, and I think today's episode 18, Paul, for the Breaking Average podcast, and we're continuing to explore your book, Breaking Average: 7 Critical Factors for Team Strong Leadership, and we're going to dive into I guess part 3 of the very first section, delivering the dream, or vision, delivering the dream.
Yeah. So, vision, I mean, it's so important, so critical for teams, for leaders. And I think we just kind of sketched through it, right? We just kind of hit the top of the wave on vision sometimes. And we really need to wrestle this thing and really understand and apply it. And so, yeah, we're going to dive into it because we need to make vision stick. It's not about just the dream. It's about this other element of the dream in terms of the impact that we're going to make with it. So again, I can't wait for this discussion.
Yeah, I love vision. I feel like I'm kind of a visionary leader at times, right? Sometimes I have more vision than I have understanding and knowledge to pull it off. But I think back in history, Paul, and look at the individual efforts as we think about, teams that break average, right? And you've got teams like the Patriots, who for so long were so good. And by the time this episode airs, we potentially will see Tom Brady win his 10th Super Bowl ring and not be on the New England Patriots. But what a visionary team that was, right? The things that they did. And then you have, Rick lives down in Alabama. I hate to talk about the Crimson Tide, but, the vision that Nick Saban had. And, what a different leader he is, Paul. I mean, I don't know if you've heard much of his story, but he didn't even want to be a coach. His dad was a grocery store owner. He was kind of going to go back and work in that small town. And he got invited to come, be on a coaching staff at a little small team. But all of these leaders, right? These leaders, Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, then you got Steve Kerr, who took the Golden State Warriors to a new level with just a new vision, breaking average. But it begins with that vision, Paul. And, when we discuss vision today, we're going to talk about the element of delivering the dream. But I want to have you kind of set it up with a story from that portion of the book, Paul, before we go much further.
Yeah, this whole element, we've got some great stories that are in there. And, what's really cool is that my thirst and hunger for stories has increased dramatically just by really understanding this whole concept of breaking average. I love stories of breaking average, and I think most people do. You think back to our movie set that we did, we were really picking movies that represented lives and stories of things and individuals and teams breaking average, which is fantastic. Here's one story that I think is really kind of sets the stage for this discussion today. It's the story of Roger Bannister. Now, have you guys ever been on a cross country team or a track team or anything like that?
Yeah, that's me. I run a lot. Yeah. You can tell.
Yeah.
The big runner.
You've seen other people run, right?
No, I have. Yeah. Mostly in the mornings as I'm driving by in my car. Yes.
On TV. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, back in the day, I was a sprinter. I like the short distances, but there's a longer distance, it's called the mile, right? I don't know what they call it now because everything's in meters. But back in the day, in the 50s, there was a guy named Roger Bannister, and he was studying, I think he was at Oxford, and he's studying to be a physician. But he's also a runner, and he's starting to think about, hey, could it happen? Nobody at that point had ever broken the 4-minute mile. It had never been done. The belief system was, well, maybe 20 years from now, 30 years, maybe never. Like, it can't happen. It's impossible. But he started to really think through that. And he was like, wait a minute. It is possible. I think it's possible. So he maybe there was a 4-minute mile that was broken in a practice or a wind aided, or maybe on top of a high elevation kind of situation, but not in a competitive race. So he started thinking about vision. He had a vision for breaking the 4-minute mile, but that wasn't enough. He had to pull in somebody to kind of help him. He pulled in his coach and he strategized over it, and he started to break it down into components. Like, wait a minute, there's 4 increments in this thing. I'm going to run this thing 4 times. And so I can obviously know what my time split should be for each of those rounds, right? So I can do that. And if I can kind of shave this thing off, if I can hit this time here and this time here, and he started thinking through it and developed a strategy, and he executed that strategy. And in 1954, he broke the 4-minute mile. Now, again, nobody had done it to that point. Now, since Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, guess what? Everybody else started breaking the 4-minute mile too. It was like a new belief system just popped up, because belief drives behavior. And I love that story. We can take that dream, we can just push it forward, strategize, execute, and find a way to deliver it. And when we do, we create a whole new belief system. And so there's a lot more that we can unpack on that. It's a fantastic story, but that's the one that comes to mind for delivering the dream, is the Roger Bannister story.
Yeah, it's a great story. I love it, Paul. You turned me on to a book recently that I just finished listening to on Audible a couple of days ago called Who, Not How. And he talks about the stories in there and the power of story and being the hero for somebody, right? Who can you be the hero for? I don't know if you remember that, Paul, but
yeah,
Bannister became the hero for other runners, right? Now, he's not a hero for me because I remember running up kind of like Rick. I think, man, back when I was growing up, we had to run for football or whatever. That quarter mile, that track, like that circle, it looks so big when you like start around it and you get on one end of it. And I'm like, oh my God, the other end is like 5 miles down there. Yeah. I hated it. I don't know about you, but I want to bring our friends, Rick's kind of jumped in a minute ago. Rick Morris is with us today, and Diane Kane. How are you guys doing today?
Doing fantastic.
Freezing, but good.
Yeah, freezing, but good up in the Northeast. Rick just finished his morning run. Rick, how are you doing?
Yeah,
man?
Yeah, 6.5 miles, under 4 minutes on each one. I mean, I believe it.
That's impressive.
I believe it.
What's incredible about that running story is I watch these marathoners. They like average 4 minutes a mile. Can you imagine? I mean, for 26 miles, can you imagine that?
No.
It's just amazing, right? I mean, that's basically 15 miles an hour. I can't even do that on my bike on my road, and these runners are doing it. So it's just pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is incredible.
What's interesting about that story, Paul, though, when you said your belief drives behavior, is that everybody just had the accepted belief that the 4-minute mile wouldn't be broken. And it became the excuse to not push yourself to that limit until this guy comes along. And I wonder if he had some backlash. I wonder if there's other runners going, oh, hey, easy on that 4-minute mile, dude. Don't you be pressing that 4-minute mile. Like, I don't want to run that fast. Like, right. You had those experiences in football then, Mike, if you're bringing that back, where they're like, hey, easy on the wind sprints, kid. Right? Like the bigger guys would be like, chill out. We don't want to look bad. You're making us look bad. Yeah. It's interesting to me.
Well, you know what used to drive me crazy, man? I was in the Army. You guys know that. And so part of the Army physical fitness test was a 2-mile run. And so you had to run it at a certain pace to not get kicked out of the Army or whatever. And the fastest I ever ran that 2 miles was like 12 minutes and 36 seconds. So that's a 6-minute, little over a 6-minute mile, right? But there would be guys by the time I get back to in that 12 and a half minutes, they would already be like having their cigarette and drinking their beer because there are literally guys that could run it in 9.5, 10 minutes. And what killed me is they were the smokers. Like, I took care of myself. They're smoking a cigarette while they run and say, hey, Harbor, pick it up. And so Rick, I hated those guys.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh my God.
The fastest time in the mile now is 3 minutes and 43 seconds.
Jeez, that's my heart would explode, man.
Just unbelievable.
I'm excited when I can do 10 minutes. Forget it.
It's tough. It's tough. Diane, glad to have you with us today. Let's recap us a little bit on what we've been talking about with this whole idea of vision.
Well, we've been talking about the 3 components of vision. You know, the first one was dreaming it, thinking about, is a 4-minute mile actually possible? Then declaring it. We are talking about bringing those other people along. And I love, Paul, the story because he brought in a team to like start to break this apart, and then delivering it. And I love this part because you've all been talking about it. The vision needs to be pursued by a community of people willing to sacrifice to deliver. A community of people. One person has the idea, one person has the declaration, but it takes a community to deliver it. Even though there was one runner that broke it, now the community is all breaking this 4-minute mile, breaking it down to 3.5 minutes. You know, that belief that drove the behavior is a disruption, and now you've got an entire community who knows that they can do it. So I think that's a really cool part. And you know, Mike, you just pick up the pace, dude. Stop having so many beers.
You know, it's I don't like those running communities anymore. Again, I can go back to my Army days. We used to have these running clubs. I can't even remember. We had this one running club, but the whole idea was to run. But at the end of the run, you know, it was somebody's responsibility to bring the keg, right? So it was it's called a beer run, you know, but you didn't really make a beer run. Someone else made the beer run, and they had the keg at the, you know, you got to run this 3 miles. It's a fun run. And those were my favorite kind of runs, man.
That's really good because you have the carbs at the end.
Yeah, you carb reload, right? You carb reload. Rick, what about you, man?
Yeah, I think today we're going to focus on the element of delivering it, and what I loved in the book as well is you know, Paul's really, we can all agree, better half, Barbara, really wrote a great insight in that. She talked about 4 steps within delivering it, which was you know, it really around your vision, around journaling, which we all agree is super, super important. Capturing your I have a dream, which we discussed on the last podcast, aligning your mindset with your vision and checking in with your team. So we're going to dive into those components as we really start to break down and mastermind around this delivering it portion of vision.
Yeah, I love that. Love where we're going today. Before we go too much further, though, I do want to invite our listeners, if you're listening to the Breaking Average podcast or you're watching live on the Empowered Living Show, we want to invite you to visit our website, breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader. leader/leader. I almost messed that up. We want to invite you to introduce us to leaders out there in the world that are great visionaries, great breaking average leaders that we can talk to, interview for special episodes that we have on the Breaking Average podcast. So we just have a simple and easy way to capture their names. Again, if you'll just visit breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And we've got a sponsor too. Mike, you are our sponsor today. So I'm excited to share with everybody about Harbor Resources. They have, Mike, that planner that you just put out at the beginning of the year, fantastic planner. Love it. So can you tell everybody real quick, I'm putting you on the spot and Diane's showing it off. What's the resource that you got?
Yeah, so the Daily Compass Quarterly Planner, Paul, it's just a tool I've been using for years. You know, you 4 probably make fun of me a little bit because I'm pretty rigid. I'm pretty type A. I want to make sure that I'm getting all my right activity done. And so I created this tool years ago called the Daily Compass. It's just a daily tool that I use to write down my 3 most important rocks, right? The 3 things I want to do today. Most people focus on 100 things they need to get done, and they bounce around kind of like hummingbirds, never really completing the activity they need to get completed. So created that tool this year. We just released it as a planner to help you kind of look at your year goals, set your vision for what you want your life and your leadership to be. And then there's quarterly Daily Compass tool sheets in that planner to help you plan every single day to accomplish those things. You can go to dailycqp.com and grab a copy of that. Hope it helps you. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, Daily CQP, right?
dailycqp.com.
Just go to Daily CQP, check it out. You know, reach out to Mike and his team. I mean, with fantastic coaching. Mike has helped me immensely, and it's just a joy to be here, recording this with you on this podcast and sharing with the world, the insights, because you have, we're going to talk about insights in a future podcast, which is going to be great, but you're sort of my insight guy. I reach out to you for insights, and you help, and you take vision and you really help flourish that vision with other people. So even though you're not going to break the 4-minute mile anytime soon, you do break other things for us, or you help us break those limitations that we have and get past that. And so if you need help breaking a limitation, reach out to Mike and his team. All right. So I'm excited again about vision. So let's keep going, man.
Yeah. So Paul, let's talk about, let's get into the book, Breaking Average. Okay. In the book, it talks about this third element of vision, delivering it. What does deliver it mean, and why does it matter? And what's the leader's role in that? What do we have to play? So we'll kind of dive in. Rick, let's start with you today, my friend.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? My life my career is spent around delivering the vision, right? Executing the project, doing the work. And, we've talked quite a bit on the podcast of me being a project turnaround specialist. I generally get brought into projects that are mid-flight and failing. And it was really interesting reading Barbara's tips and insights because of that fourth step that I just shared, right? We had journal, we've got declare I have a dream, align your mindset and vision, but that's all the work itself of the leader getting the vision ready and making sure that the vision aligns with the mindset. But then you've got to transfer that vision to your team in order to deliver it. And you've got to execute that in a way that you're communicating properly. And that's where I see a lot of failure. When I was turning around these projects at Xerox, I remember I was young and I still really wasn't on my growth journey and still didn't know kind of the things that I was doing that was being successful. I was being successful. I didn't know why, right? It was one of those things. And it was interesting to me that I discovered very quickly that almost 90% of the projects to this day that I've turned around, the answers were provided to me by the team. And I remember this one project very vividly. Like I went in and it's the first time I ever saw a high-ranking executive, somebody I looked up to, cry over a status of a project, like literally in tears, just didn't know what he was going to do, what was going to happen. It was it was really just surreal moment for me because I'm like, it's just a project, right? At the end of the day. And within about 2.5, 3 hours, I had the answer. And I remember he cried again. He was like, you've saved us. You saved the branch. You've saved all these people's jobs. And I was like, I just asked a question and listened to the answer. Like I didn't get it. And so that fourth insight that Barbara really shares, which is check in with your team and don't be afraid as a leader to be a servant leader and ask them what they need and ask them what they see that could be done differently in order to deliver it, because 9 times out of 10, they're going to be right. And all the times that I saw these projects diverge is because the leader is like, no, this is what we have to do. We got to do it this way. And the team's like, yeah, but that's not going to work. No, do it this way. It's my vision, get it done. So what was really interesting to me in why vision in delivering it is that fourth step, checking in with your team. And the pioneer's role, the leader's role is to listen.
Yeah, that's good. Rick, you mentioned you weren't really sure why you weren't being successful. We'll talk about that offline. I'll help you with that part.
No, I was successful. I didn't know why, but I'll be willing to jump in on that conversation.
Yeah, I'll help you. We should do that offline and not share that with our listeners. I don't want to embarrass you, man. Diane, help us out here.
Rick, as you were talking, it's always the person closest to the problem that knows the solution, right? I was just listening to Kat Cole, and that was one of the things that she talked about was as a leader, we need to know and be open to and ask all the questions, right? And yes, we're the ones that are holding the vision. And one of the stories that she shared was she's like, I deployed this vision and we put it out there. And once it got out into the street, and that's what happens, right? The vision gets out there and then we start to filter it down. Like the game of telephone, what the vision was and what happens down on the street is sometimes two different things. And you've got to rein that back in and make sure that we're listening. And from the pioneer's perspective, yes, we have to continue to keep repeating what the vision is, but we also need to know when to stop the train if it's gone off the tracks and pull it back in. And Paul, I love the picture that's in the book, right? Because we talk about the vision. We've got the leader who has the dream over here, and then we've got the contributors who are declaring it. But that meaty middle is the delivery part, and that's where the team is. And so having that continual communication, Rick, like you said, you look like the hero because you're the one who's simply asking the questions that nobody's afraid to ask. Right? When you're coming in and you have no attachments, you ask the questions. You get to be the dummy in the room and help ask that question, like what's working, what's not working, what do we need to continue? And if you were me, what would you do? And so I think that that team conversation is really the biggest part. And I call it the meaty middle because that's really where everything is happening.
I love what you just said, Diane, about you tried to call Rick a hero, but then you called him a dummy in the room.
I said, I'd like to be the dummy in the room.
Oh, okay.
No, but Diane, what you just said, the telephone game, I haven't put those two things together, and I don't want people to gloss over that because you just kind of said that in a passing comment. But if you've ever played the game, and that may be a really cool thing to do in kind of an open format or seminar when we're talking about vision and why it's important to declare is to play the telephone game where somebody says a sentence and then it passes it down to 20 people and then they reveal what they heard and how much that's changed. And I think that's a wake-up call for leaders to say, you can't just communicate to your 4 or 5 people that are in a circle and then expect that to be executed. Like you've got to make sure that 20th person down the line heard it from you the way it was intended to be heard. That was a brilliant insight. I didn't want to gloss past that.
Yeah, I think that's good, and also making sure you communicate it downstream in the appropriate way. But Paul, I think something I'd like to hear from you is what happens when you have resistors, right? You've got contributors to the vision, but what about the resistor piece as well?
Well, you're gonna have resistance all along, right? Part of that resistance is internal. Part of that resistance is you. Like, well, maybe we don't have what it takes. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this. And we've kind of talked about that in the first 2 elements of this thing, but it will really manifest itself in that delivery stage, right? When you're trying to push forward, you're going to feel the resistance. Murphy shows up, everybody's right. Murphy shows up.
Such a bugger.
Oh yeah. And then, you'll have others who are just contributing to, let's be honest. We're human. We make mistakes. We complain. We whine a little bit sometimes. And sometimes we're just uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. And it's hard to deliver because it's so hard. The process is so difficult. And we've got to fight through it. We got to get back to the why. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it really is reflecting back on the why. Why are we doing this again? What's the impact that we want to make? Things of that sort. So I think that's where it goes. I mean, you can look at Bannister, you can look at Kennedy, John F. Kennedy and his moonshot goal. The thoughts that I have here is that, the leader, they're going to have that desire to deliver the dream, but we need other people to make this happen. We can't do this alone. Together we're better, right? And that's so important. So we've got to find a way to bring people in. How do we do that? We look for their strengths. We use our values to kind of connect with our why to be able to remind them of the vision of what we have. Bannister needed a coach. He needed the competition of a few rivals too. He couldn't do it alone. And there's a great race where shortly after he breaks the 4-minute mile, there is another race, and I forget the American that he's competing against. They both break the 4-minute mile, first time in history. And they end up being, at first they're rivals or enemies or competitors, but they actually changed the world. And I think they became really good friends. Kennedy's moonshot goal needed rocket scientists, astronauts, and even the janitor, right? So they're all in the same boat rowing towards that dream of putting man on the moon. So, there's a lot of thoughts there. I love Helen Keller's thought, by the way. She says that alone we can do so little. Together, we can do so much. And breaking average means we have to break the limits of belief. And, that thought of like, who says we can't? Well, we got to break that. You can run a sub 4-minute mile. You can land on the moon. You know, you can pay off that debt. You can pay off that debt. You can lose that weight and start that business and finish that degree. Those are all attainable. You just got to set it and then start making those steps of progress, bring other people with you, and you need contributors. You need a support team. You know, we're doing this podcast, not one of us alone. We're working together. We're all contributing in different ways, and hopefully we're adding value to other folks. But that's what we do. We're designed to work together. And it's tough with COVID, right? Because we've been so geographically separated in our world, it's hard for us to contribute the way we need to, but yet we still need to. We got to find a way to come together, pursue dreams, make impact.
Yeah, I think that's so good. You know, again, Paul, this topic, I'm a big believer in multiple resources, right? Paul, I know you read a ton of books. I read a ton of books. We probably all do here. But the book that keeps coming back to mind as we have this discussion is Who, Not How, right? I mean, you just talked about we need those other contributors. The four of us on the Breaking Average podcast, we all play a different role. You know, Rick behind the scenes makes us all look better because he's taking out some of our, you know, hopefully, you know, Rick is not secretly creating a bloopers reel that he'll, you know,
without a doubt,
share out once in a while because he makes us look better. He cuts out the bloopers or mistakes, you know, and those kind of things. And Diane's putting our transcripts together and she's helping us, you know, move the process forward. And we all have a different role here. Paul, I'm not sure what you do yet, but other than show up, but we all have a different role. No, I'm just kidding. It's the vision behind it, right? You're pushing us forward. And that's really where kind of the rubber meets the road is having a vision, pulling people together. Kind of the leader has to pull people together and keep us focused on that vision, right? To take action toward that vision. There's an old quote that says, where our focus goes, our energy flows. And so the leader, to deliver on this vision, that the leader has to keep all of the contributors focused on the vision, because those naysayers, those limiting beliefs that every individual has that are different than each one of us, those things will start getting in the way. So let's talk about how we really go about. So we've talked about the leader's role in that.
Yeah.
Let's go to cultivating it in others. How do we kind of cultivate this dream in others? Because a lot of times people, the first instinct will look at us and say, man, you're crazy. You're crazy. Who wants to jump in on that?
Cultivating it in others. And the best example I have of that is my time at the bank. When I was in Bank of America, we had the brand new CEO coming in at the time. So Brian Moynihan walked into the pile, quite frankly, when he took on the role. And one of the things that I saw that him do repeatedly, right? The leader has to pull in the vision. And it was very, very different than the course we had been on. And then he's talking about cultivating it. And how do we cultivate it? And how do you declare it? And how do you dream it? It's over and over again. It's not one time painting the picture. It's every single time that you're in front of the team. It's every single time that we're together. It's the values that we've talked about. It's the vision that we've talked about. But how do we do that? And what's the medium? So it was visual, it was written, it was video, it was all of those things. And it was transferring that vision over and over and over again, like repetition ad nauseum, you know, like Mike, you razz and Rick all the time.
Right.
It's like that 7 times though, right? Sometimes it takes the 7th. You got to just keep messaging it, and the 7th time it finally sticks, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And walking the talk, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key, right? Making it stick. There's a book from Andy Stanley. Paul, you and I've talked about this a lot. He's got a little book I love, Making Vision Stick. Rick, jump in. Sorry.
Well, no, I think it's important to also engage all the senses. It's not, as you were saying, Diane, it's not just, standing up on stage and saying a message. It's written form. And that's remembering that everybody communicates, differently. One of the tricks that I learned from stage is when I'm asking a question, I ask it in 2 ways. I go, what do you guys think about that? How does that make you feel? And that's actually just one long question that I ask, because I'm engaging both sides of the audience. Some people think about a problem. Some people feel the solution. And so you have to make sure you engage all the senses. We talked about the wonderful I Have a Dream speech in the last podcast. And one of the things was how he made you feel the sweltering heat. He made you feel the uncomfortableness. He made you feel what it would be like if everything came together, as well as delivered the message to make people think that that's actually occurring. And so make sure people can feel the vision, can think about the vision, and not just hear it.
Yeah, I love that, Rick. That's so good. Those of you who are watching on the Empowered Living Show, you see a poster I have up behind me. Remember the Titans. Coach Boone did that so well, right? That my favorite scene in that movie, from those of you who want to go back and listen to our movie, top movie selection, where he takes the team out to the Civil War graveyard, right? And just he connected everybody to those feelings, those sensory items to really draw the team together, Rick. That's where he made the vision stick and made it, cultivated it in his team as well.
Yeah, he took him on a run. 4-minute mile run.
Yeah, he sure did. Right?
In the middle of the night. In the middle of the night.
Yeah. I love what you shared though, Rick. You said, think about it, that, a leader does this, right? To transform that vision and make it stick, as Mike was sharing, is we ask questions so that they think about it, so they feel it, so they see it, so they hear it. And in this case, with Coach Boone, taking them into the cemetery, so they actually kind of smell it too. They kind of smell that morning mist. There's all the sensories are involved. That is a powerful thought. And what came to mind as you were sharing that is I read a book a few years ago called The Power of Moments, and I won't unpack it here, but it's so good. They're talking about 4 different elements: the power of insight, the power of pride. We'll hit that here in a second. The power of connection, and the power of elevation, where you kind of emotionally bring somebody up. And if we can bring those 4 things in, we're really connecting, and we can kind of transfer that vision to others, and they can carry it on. Remember the Titans is a great story, Mike, because there was no way they were going to win many games at all until they were brought together, and there was a vision that was cast, and they said, well, who says we can't? And let's go do this. And they found a way, and it's again our winning movie, and for a good reason. And I love those kind of stories, because you see the transfer of the vision from one person to others, and just the impact that takes place. It brings a nation together.
Yeah, that's right. I think I'm not going to add a whole lot, because you all have shared a ton. But I think the key takeaway here is, one is the leader has to be committed. And the leader has to be a communicator, right? I mean, those 2 things: committed to the vision, and then communicated in different ways with different stories to draw people forward into that, so we can move forward. Paul, let's jump into our tip and challenge portion. Once again, we want to thank Paul, you should really do that. Let's jump into our tip and challenge. I don't want to thank myself. Let me thank myself. I'm the sponsor of.
There you go. Put that on a blooper roll.
There you go. Let's jump in our tip and portion challenge, Paul.
Yeah, Mike, there's so many things that are important here as we're landing the plane on vision and making it stick and delivering it. And the first thing I would say is you're really connecting with the team. That's really important. Before I get to my tip and challenge, is make sure you spend time affirming them and appreciating them and acknowledging them. I mentioned a moment ago about the moment of pride. Pride is really that, right? Not in a negative sense. I know pride goeth before a fall. We're not talking about that kind of pride. We're talking about just that you're proud of your team members, proud of what they're doing, their contributions. They are contributors. So affirm them, appreciate them, acknowledge them. Hey, the struggle, guys, isn't having a vision. That's not the struggle. The struggle is going to be trying to figure out how we're going to accomplish a vision. But I would say this, that when you step forward in pursuing that vision, it's not about the how. It's just reminding ourselves of the why. Keep the why front and center. It's not the lack of how that stops you. Stops me, at least. It's the lack of why. If my why is in front of me, if I remember the reason why I'm doing it, the purpose, the reason for this thing, man, I can plow through it and I can make it happen. There's some great quotes on that. Wish we had more time to dive into it. But I would say my tip and challenge, guys, just go forward. Keep the why in front of you. Don't try to make it perfect. What do they say? Perfect is the enemy of good enough. Don't try to make it perfect. Just get it out there and get it done. The best way to improve the dream is make those steps forward and get it out there. And it's something that we call ideate, right? So ideate, prototype, evaluate. Just get it out there. You can learn from it. Just like these podcasts, the four of us, we sit down later and say, hey, what can we do to make these things better? We're putting something out there. We're delivering on the dream, but we're going to improve on that dream. Every single one of these podcasts, we're trying to find a way to make it even better. And that's really the pattern in life. I think that's what we have to do. We've got to deliver it. Don't wait. Don't try to get it perfect. Just get it out there. So that's my tip and challenge.
Yeah, that's so good, Paul. Thanks, man. And I don't know that I have a whole lot to add other than, I think the tip is understand who your contributors are, right? And I keep coming back to, again, to this book, Who, Not How. Who are your contributors? Who needs to be involved in the message? Who needs to know the message? Who needs to hear it that seventh time before they hear it for the first time, right? And the challenge is, as a leader, don't get lost in the limiting beliefs that you have within yourself, and don't allow the limiting beliefs that others have stop you from pursuing that dream. That's my tip and challenge today, Paul.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Hey, guys, this has been another great recording. Diane, Rick, thank you for being a part of this. And Mike, thank you for being a sponsor for this show today. Again, guys, go out there to dailycqp.com. Check out the Daily Planner. Reach out to Mike. He's here to help you. He's here to help you make that vision stick. And that planner will certainly help you in that regard. So thankful for that. If you are interested in being a sponsor of our podcast, we're certainly interested in you in the terms of we want the value that you're trying to make in the world to be shared with others. So consider being a sponsor with us. Just go to breakingaveragepodcast.com and look for the contact list and let us know that you'd like to be a sponsor. So Mike, thank you, man.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. It's always a pleasure having this Breaking Average conversation with you. I want to thank Diane and Rick for joining us today. They always add great value to the conversation. And, we want to just continue to invite our listeners to join us on the Breaking Average podcast. Share it with your friends, share it with your colleagues. Let's help the whole world grow. And then if you're watching live on the Empowered Living Show, we want to thank you for that as well. Continue to remember us. If you know leaders out in the marketplace that we can talk to, breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader. We'll see you on the next episode of the Breaking Average Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average Podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R2 Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.